James catches, puts up a three. Won't go. Rebound Bosch. Back out to Allen. His three-pointer. Bang! Tie game with 5 seconds remaining.
All right, the away team is back with a special guest. It's Cole here and Dimitri.
Hey, how's it going?
And we have Joe Garcia, the host of the Two Shots podcast and director of digital content for Project Spurs. You can check him out at Two Shots Podcast on Twitter and anywhere else we need to plug you, Joe?
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and I'm also a frequent contributor of Locked on Spurs, and I also contribute to the Chris Duell Show quite often here at the Ticket 760. Just want to give a quick shout out to my good friend Jeff Garcia.
Yep.
Just wanted to say, make sure you go and follow him and all the great stuff he drops as far as his Spurs content goes as well.
Yeah, and that's actually how we found out about you. We messaged Jeff because we had him on the podcast probably about 2 months ago now. I think it was August.
Yeah, it was during like the midst of the bubble games, I think, right when the last playoff spots were being secured. So a very tense time for Spurs fans around the world.
Yeah, that's right. It was like right when the Spurs were on the brink of being eliminated. They had a little bit of chance, but I think the last two teams, like they needed the Suns and the Blazers to lose, and they both won.
And the Grizzlies too.
Yeah,
I think they needed three teams to lose. It was against all odds. But they did everything they could.
Yeah. But today, and just to let the viewers know, we're recording this on Tuesday, right before Game 4, and we probably won't be releasing this until after the game. So today we won't be getting into predictions or analyses of Game 4. We did that in a recap episode that we recorded yesterday of Game 3 with some analysis for Game 4. So if you want some of that content, just check out that episode. For this podcast, I thought we could do a little bit more broad picture finals talk and then get into some Spurs and general NBA talk. So we'll just jump right in. So I thought it would be fun to have somebody that follows and covers the Spurs on, because what's interesting about this finals is the big narrative has been LeBron James going up against his old team, right? Mm-hmm. And he left in free agency of 2014 after being beaten by the San Antonio Spurs.
Pretty badly.
Terribly beaten, yeah. In what was a redemption series for the Spurs too, right? So after 6 years of retooling, the Heat are back in the finals to face LeBron on the other side of the court. And I was just curious, just opening things up broadly to you, what's it been like watching this series as a Spurs fan?
I guess it's been like you could say, it's been like a redemption story, I believe, for both sides, not only for the Lakers, but also for the Heat as well. Mm-hmm. I believe that Danny Green said as much as well. They did a story on Danny Green, and I believe it came out on Lakers Nation, from what I remember seeing it on the blog site. And the quote from him is, he said, "I feel like this Lakers team is more similar to our 2014 Spurs team," he said, than the Toronto team last season. He says, in Toronto, we had a lot more younger guys. San Antonio, we had a lot more vets, older guys, but we had a mix. Me, Kawhi were a little younger, but in our primes. And then we had some older guys, and that's exactly right. I guess that's a good fitting description of what the Lakers are right now. There are savvy veterans on that team combined with some of the youth. And when you combine the experience with that young, quick athleticism, and not only that, but in the way that they play defense and the way that they have that ball movement, especially on the perimeter, it's kind of reminiscent of what the Spurs did in 2014 as far as their play goes. And then on that same token, you look at Miami, and they have a lot of youth on there, and they do have some veterans. You have Gordon Dragic, you have Jimmy Butler, and then you have the OG Haslam, who's already pushing near 40 years old. And these are savvy veterans that have been in playoff battles before. So you have that mix again, but on the flip side with Miami, you have a lot of inexperience with some of this youth, like Tyler Hero, for example, Adebayo, who's coming into his own great block that he had,
Yeah.
in the playoffs. Everybody was like, "Oh my God, look at that block!" One of the best, I have to say. But the inexperience has shown itself in the first two showings, um, and then you had game three, and then wow, look at Butler had to score 40 plus points and really put his team on his back, and you had some good plays still coming out from the younger players from the Heat, but it shows that that Heat team is capable of playing a lot better, even though they're missing two of their key pieces, as long as the other players step up, mainly the younger players. And it's just one of these things. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a star-studded team to get the win. It just means you have to play a smart style of basketball. And hearkening back to that Spurs system, the beautiful game, as long as you don't make a lot of mistakes, you go ahead and play to the best of your ability and play to your strengths. Pass the ball. Don't hold it. When the ball sticks, bad things happen. And we've seen the Heat time and time again, I guess, in this series, where they're playing that zone, and they get in trouble when they play that zone defense against the Lakers. It's not conducive to them, because they wind up getting these mismatches where LeBron can just go one-on-one. He gets to the paint easily, overpowers his defender, gets to the basket, gets to the bucket, makes an easy basket, or gets fouled, gets the and one, and gets to the stripe. You don't need to do that. You just need to play fundamental basketball. And again, the comparisons between the Lakers, Miami Heat, and then the Spurs of the 2014 NBA Finals, there's similarities there, definitely. But to me, it's always been more of the redemption story for the Spurs. And, LeBron has been there 10 times going to the NBA Finals. He's only won 3. Now we're having this game 4 coming up, and you get the insertion of one Adebayo, who's rumored to be inserted into the starting lineup again, and things get interesting. I mean, what does this say if LeBron isn't able to overcome this Heat team? What does that say about his legacy, even though he's thought about as one of the best players to ever play the game? But he's been to the finals 10 times, and he's only won three chips, so you have that to contend with.
Yeah, I think there's a lot there. Maybe we could start with similarities between these teams and the 2014 Spurs.
Yeah, because I think for us, I didn't see the Lakers and 2014 Spurs similarity as strongly as I saw more with the Heat and the kind of play style that they've used to get themselves to this point, right? Like Jimmy Butler might be their superstar, but if you look at the way that he's played through the first 3 rounds, barring a few like very flashy exceptions, there's been a lot of selflessness and ball movement and just kind of beautiful basketball. It's really funny that the game that they just won was like just Jimmy Butler, basically ball hogging it, but playing amazing hero ball, some of the most beautiful hero ball you can see. So it's very interesting to see that the Lakers are being compared to the 2014 Spurs, because I do kind of see that. I guess the level of ball movement and the egalitarian nature, it seems a bit more hierarchical. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd just say also, I think one thing that separates the Lakers from the 2014 Spurs is the 2014 Spurs didn't really have a primary playmaker like the Lakers do, right? Everything runs through LeBron, and he increases the playmaking ability of everyone around him, right? Well, I guess that's not totally true. Rondo is quite a good playmaker himself, and Anthony Davis has moments too. But with the 2014 Spurs, I mean, it was just 1 through 8 on the roster was a good, heady passer with a high basketball IQ, right? Even the guys that played minutes off the bench, right? Manu Ginobili, Bellinelli, Patty Mills, those guys were always cutting around each other, playmaking, passing, finding the right man.
You can't forget Boris Diaw. He was an instrumental part to that as well. He kind of reminded me of the Swiss Army knife for the San Antonio
Well, I had forgotten he started. For some reason, I thought, I just imagined him, because he played with those bench units.
Yeah.
at least in my memory, it's always him playing with the bench units, right? And I looked back at some of these box scores, and I forgot that he was a starter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Boris Diaw was very methodical. He wasn't a flashy player by any means, but he was always able to get into the right spots at the right time. And people forget how prolific a passer he was. He was an amazing passer. He could get that ball to anybody in any traffic or whatever. He just had a knack for that bounce pass, that weird angle. I mean, he could get people cut into the rim. It was, in fact, a beautiful game, and it wasn't just him doing it.
Always made the right decision, too.
Yeah,
So
I think
definitely something.
I think Miami, by losing Goran Dragic and Bam for the last couple games, has definitely lost a big part of what made the offense so mobile. Tyler Hero, he's learning, but he's still, once he gets the ball in his hands, it can be kind of like, oh God, what's happening next, right? Either he's going to hit an insane contested fadeaway jumper, or he's going to get stripped and look like a fool. So hopefully with Bam back, I think they will definitely shift their strategy and hopefully take some of the load off of Jimmy Butler and go back to this really dynamic offense that has been working so well for them.
I like their defense. I got to say, Miami's defense, I think, has been the one thing that's really impressed me on this run that they've been on, going all the way to the finals. Unfortunately, we haven't seen much of that defense on display against the Lakers because it's harder for them to play that style of basketball, missing two key pieces.
Especially Bam.
Yeah, especially Bam. He's a very instrumental part to what they do. But you got to tip their hat for what they were able to do in Game 3. They showed a lot of promise because I believe Haslam's the one that got really angry at them in Game 2, where he was just tearing into them. He was yelling at them because he knew the team could play better. Even though they got the L, I believe what he was saying is you're capable of playing better than what you're showing right now. If they get the L, so be it, but you played your hearts out. They just weren't playing to their potential, and I think that's what really was upsetting them, and he started calling them out on that, and lo and behold, Game 3, they played a hell of a lot better on their defensive front. But yeah, I mean, I think they were doing a better job of coming out and really putting the clamps on Anthony Davis. They weren't letting him get to the rim easily. They were keeping him out there on the perimeter. They were really putting bodies on him and not letting him get comfortable. And I think that really showed what they were capable of doing as far as this one-on-one, man-on-man type of defense is what we saw where they were so good in this playoff run versus them trying to set up and play that stupid zone defense that I just absolutely hate because it exposes their weaknesses. And when you just feed in the middle, you're just feeding people in the paint right in the middle. You either have, Anthony Davis, you have LeBron James, you're going to have Dwight Howard in there. It's just too much length and too much, it's a mismatch in the paint, and it's just too much length and athleticism and power for the Heat to really match up against any type of player like that because they don't have that, So when they're playing that one-on-one defense, man, it's something. And I'm excited about this game because I want to see them play that style of defense again. And if they can, and if they can keep it close, they really give themselves a shot at tying the series up. And then the Lakers are in trouble.
And isn't the old adage, like, you get everyone touches on offense, and then that will encourage them to put in more on defense? And I think that they've really exemplified that. I mean, even turning, a guy like Jay Crowder, who was basically, I don't think anyone was thinking about him really when he was on Memphis, although as someone that liked to watch Memphis games, I thought he was awesome. But he's been really great throughout. I think he's been a little bit, kind of reverted to the mean in the finals, but he's an underrated passer. He's hitting big shots. Like, he's a crucial role player and one of those guys that is like the perfect, just understated, usually makes the right call, and you can rely on him to be a big part of your team dynamic.
And he can hit a three.
Yeah.
And also, not to mention, he's guarded Anthony Davis three times as much as any other Miami player. And he's done a pretty good job. The numbers, I believe he's held Davis to 50% shooting, which doesn't sound great. But when you look at that compared to what guys like Kelly Olynyk are doing against Davis, it's just drastically a huge improvement, So, yeah, I mean, he's been huge. It will be interesting to see what happens defensively in this next game. And also just in terms of rotations, right? Because I think one of the things that Miami figured out in game 3 was, look, we're not going to be able to completely hold the Lakers back defensively, right? We're really going to have to outscore this team. So we're going to put shooting around Butler, right? And spread the floor 4 out and give Butler the ball for post-ups and isolation plays. And you wonder, and he got so much space and was able to work, right? And you wonder if he's going to have those same opportunities when you have a non-shooter out there like Bam. That's one thing I'm worried about here.
Yeah, he's going to have a little bit tougher of a time, I think, because what's going to happen is that Miami is going to double and triple team him. They're going to give him different looks, and I think they're going to do it early on instead of letting him get set up in the paint. They're going to come out at the perimeter, and they're going to start putting a lot of pressure on the Miami Heat to try to even get the ball, into the paint, because they're going to have to first start passing the ball along the perimeter first, and then it's going to have to switch hands to the interior, because if they try to force it, it's going to turn into a turnover. And that's one thing that they don't want to do. They want to keep their turnovers to a minimum, because you don't want to give the Lakers, points, just freebies, so they have to keep their mistakes to a minimum. But I think one of the things that can help them is Adebayo coming out, setting picks, maybe getting a pick and roll situation or a pick and pop situation, getting easy buckets, getting fouled, going to the stripe, hopefully getting the Lakers into foul trouble early. Some of the key players, whether it be LeBron, whether it be AD, even Rondo at times, he's shown that he gets frustrated and he can make mistakes. So if you can take him out of the game for stretches, that kind of negates the Lakers' playmaking ability as far as what Rondo's able to do, because, he's not going to score 30 or 40 points. But what he does is he can go ahead and just get his players or his offense running and distribute the ball, really well. That's where he's really solid, I believe, as far as his game goes. And he's made some really trick shots, like you're playing horse out there where the ball just goes really high off the glass. It kind of floats there and then it just comes right back down and whoop, it goes right into the rim. I'm like, these are shots that you can't even try to replicate if you're playing horse with somebody. It just goes to show you that Rondo just has a knack for that kind of thing. But again, it's going to be a game of chess out there. So we're going to see what both teams are going to wind up doing, because the scheme is going to change in game 4.
Yeah. I think just to, I guess, change gears a little bit, I think one of the places where we also saw similarities between the Spurs and the Heat is just kind of the way that the organizations function and the way that the teams are built. Now, obviously, you look at guys like Jimmy Butler, who signed as a free agent or signed and traded, whatever, and Iguodala and Jay Crowder, guys that are brought in. But, like Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson are all like huge success stories of the Heat development program. And they developed those guys through years of, some would call maybe mediocrity, just kind of like first round hell type situation. But they were able to not tank, not go to the gutter of the league, and maintain their competitiveness by drafting intelligently, looking to the G League and specifically their own G League team for assignments, guys that have promise. So there's just a lot there that reminds me of, like how the Spurs, like the NBA is not designed for a team to go to the playoffs for 22 years in a row, right? It's designed for there to be some kind of swinging back and forth, but some teams are able to maintain a certain level of competitiveness throughout.
Yeah, and like you said, to be cultivating these players internally, right? They're players that are undrafted on the Heat that came up through their system, right? That just struck me as very Spursy, right? And also the idea that LeBron leaves the Heat, and you would imagine, I'd say 25 out of the 30 teams in the league would have immediately began a very excruciating rebuild. But the Heat said, no, we're going to stay competitive, even if that means we're just going to be the 7 or 8 seed. And I've got to believe that the Spurs would have done the same thing, right? What do you think about that comparison, Joe? Is that pretty apt?
It's pretty accurate. What the Spurs have been able to do in the Miami Heat has been remarkable. The Spurs have had this excellence, going to the finals, or not the finals, but the playoffs 20 plus years.
Yeah.
And that in itself is a big accomplishment.
Also,
Uh,
R.I.P.
yes. In the bubble play, it was a lot different. This last season was just a kind of like a rebuild season, so to speak.
Yeah.
Lots of new players coming in, lots of new faces. You have players trying to learn the system. But on the Miami side, you have one coach Spolstra who's been there for quite some time already, and a lot of people they don't give Coach Spolstra the credit he deserves. He often gets overlooked as one of the most solid and really good coaches in the NBA. Look at what he's been able to do with this Miami team, even after post LeBron James. He's still been able to work with them. Like you said, he knew that it was going to be a rebuild. It's going to be a process. Trust the process. They went go ahead and look to the draft. They draft smart. They don't start giving up their future for a win now mentality. They were very methodical in what they were doing. Go ahead and put their players into the G League, let them develop naturally, uh, get their skill sets where they need to be. Because what a lot of people forget is that when you get players in the NBA draft, they're coming from a college system. And in college ball, the game might not move as fast as it does at the NBA level because of the level of, of athleticism that you have out there. You have really gifted players who aren't only just tall and they have a lot of length to them, but they have a lot of athleticism. The game moves a lot faster. Any mistake you make is amplified, tremendously out there on the biggest stage in front of that big crowd. And then you have to contend with the refs because you're a rookie, and anything you do is automatically going to be a foul. There's a lot of learning that needs to go on, and by the Heat keeping their players in that G League, letting them develop their skill sets, and then bringing them along naturally, it's showing right now that that system, in fact, does work, but you have to be patient. And you can't speak enough of their front office and what they've been able to do. And namely, Pat Riley, I think he's just done a tremendous job out there with the Miami Heat and that organization. You look and see what they've done as far as how they've been able to rebuild their team, and there's a lot of similarities that you could point to that mimic what San Antonio has been able to do. So if it works, other teams are going to start mimicking the same system as well. Since Miami won't be the first, there are going to be more teams that are going to go ahead and buy into that type of system. A lot of these teams who are hurting right now and maybe not even sniffing the playoffs, it's a process. You have to be smart. You have to be methodical in what you do. And most importantly, you have to believe in what you're doing. And I think the Heat have exemplified that.
Yeah, you mentioned the advantages of putting your young players through your G League system before they actually play for your team. Um, I think one of the other advantages to having that system is you get to implement your team culture from the very beginning, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the other things that I think is similar between Miami and San Antonio is they both have this strong focus on work, development, and winning, right? It just permeates the franchises. And that's something they always talk about, right? It's almost like, I like to use the word like almost military work ethic with those two teams. And I think they would embrace that word, to be honest. I was actually just thinking while you were talking, I remember reading a story from like 2009 or something about the Spurs taking their team to go visit a military base and do workouts there. Do you remember that story?
I remember that because it's something that Coach Pop will always do. He has team field trips, is what he calls them.
Yeah.
Wherever they're going in the nation, he'll have them go and do something constructive where they're actually going to learn something. It's just not, we're going to go visit a museum just to go and visit it. There's something behind that. It's a learning experience to bring them together as individuals and to enlighten them with this knowledge that they can partake in and use it on the court. So Coach Pop is really smart and a genius almost when it comes to that kind of thing. He is like a teacher, and he's imparting his views and his vision on the team, but he's doing it in a constructive way where they're going to like it. Okay, it's a field trip. We're going to go have fun. They might think it's lighthearted, but at the end of the day, they received the message and the knowledge that he wanted to, go ahead and give them.
Do you think they ever brought in Arlie Ermy, the drill sergeant guy from Full Metal Jacket, to motivate them to be better? I feel like that would
have been something.
Yeah, I think Boris Diaw would have been doing a lot of push-ups.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. It's just very interesting that, one of the other things you think about when you think about both of these organizations is accountability, right? Even the star players on the Spurs or the Heat are held accountable. And all these little things like the field trips, the practices, the games, the training camps, it all accumulates to a collective culture. And I just find other teams have tried to emulate the Spurs culture and failed. I remember reading stories about the Sixers, right, with Brett Brown, who was an assistant coach on San Antonio for a long time, trying to do similar field trips and presentations and that sort of thing. And you just look at that franchise and how its culture has fallen apart.
Ben Simmons wouldn't even be allowed to play if he refused to shoot threes like he did under Brett Brown, under like a coach that actually imparted a sense of discipline.
Yeah, for sure.
It's the structure. Basically what it is, it's not so much the military mindset, it's more the structure. It's the familiarity of having this regimen that okay, I come in here, this is what is expected of me, this is what I'm supposed to do from here on out, and as long as I do my job to the best of my ability, it'll translate to me getting more playing time out on the court. But you have to buy into that mindset. And one of the main things that happens with the San Antonio organization, or San Antonio Spurs organization, is they only draft and they only want to bring players here that they look at and they say, this player's going to fit with our system. This is a stereotypical Spurs player. And you mentioned the Sixers. The Sixers were just going after picks. This is the best player at this, third pick, first pick, whatever. And we're going to go ahead and get him because that's what we want. They didn't really necessarily say this player is going to fit with the system that we're trying to build. And now when they get a coach like Brett Brown, he comes in, tries to instill that mindset that the Spurs have, that culture, and it falls apart because you drafted players that just aren't built for that type of system.
Yeah. Do you ever look back at the Marcus Morris like lying to the Spurs and going to the Knicks instead and think we dodged a bullet there?
I think it played out the way it was supposed to. Honestly, at the end of the day, you look at that and people want to blame Marquise Morris. It's his fault. He reneged on the deal. Yes and no. You look at that and you say, if that was the case, then why didn't the Spurs organization make a more concerted effort to really guarantee that we're going to go ahead and, move this player, which was Davis Bertans, and you already signed that contract. We got you. Everything is solidified in stone before you start doing these other things behind the scenes. I think it was more that the Spurs have this old system of doing things, the handshake, the gentleman's handshake, the gentleman's agreement. And in today's NBA, a lot of these players don't have that mentality. You have to get the paper signed. At the end of the day, it's a business. To me, that was just a faux pas, a mix-up. Then somebody dropped the ball there in the Spurs front office, and you live and you learn from it. And yeah, it was a bad situation. But at the end of the day, things happen for a reason. I'm glad we didn't get him on the Spurs team because he wouldn't have been a good fit. I think he would have actually started getting into confrontations, maybe behind the scenes with the coaches or players, just because he just didn't seem like he would have been such a good fit. Because as we can see, he wants that limelight, he wants that star power. He wants that media. As far as the big media organizations that you have out there, and it's really when at the end of the day you look at San Antonio, and we're such a small media market. So you kind of get lost in the shuffle down here. But he's where he needs to be, and we have who we have on this team for a reason. And I'm just excited to see what happens moving forward into next season.
Yeah, and just quickly, that was another thing that I thought was a kind of a departure between the Heat and San Antonio, that we're talking about free agent signings. Like the Heat are a big media market with just the NBA players would, sacrifice to go there, right? Like they do have that draw, so someone like Jimmy Butler will sign. So what I think it makes the Spurs 22-year run, and we'll see going forward, so impressive is the fact that they were able to do it in a smaller media market that's not Miami. I mean,
yeah,
Miami is Miami, but the Spurs organization is just on another level.
Yeah, it is. Unfortunately, right now for the Spurs fans, it's going to be a growing year for them. It's going to be a process. And I can foresee that for the next 2 to maybe 3 seasons, there's going to be a lot of heartache going on. There's not going to be a lot of 50, 60 win seasons. It's going to be almost breaking into the playoffs, but not quite. There's going to be a lot of games that they win that gives the fans hope. And immediately they start thinking playoffs, but it might not happen that way. It just all depends on how these players develop, who steps up and who's ahead of the curve and who still needs more seasoning. But at the end of the day, I said, if you give it about 3 seasons, I think the team will have a resurgence and a return back to form, back to greatness once again, sooner rather than later. A lot of people here say that I'm being really too optimistic at times, but I'm telling them in 3 seasons, you're going to have the perfect storm where you have these current contracts with some of these aging veterans that we have, they start coming off the books. Then you have this inflection of youth that we have right now as far as DeJounte, Derek White, Keldon Johnson, Lonnie Walker. These players are only going to start getting better as they have more and more playing time and as they have more time out there on the court together and they start to gel together and realize, hey, this is what their tendencies are. Then you're going to have the other players, Quindary Weatherspoon, you have Luka Samanic, they start coming into their own. And then lo and behold, you're going to have these other players who are really young right now, the savvy veterans, and start being, they're going to be at their prime mixed with this youthfulness that we have, this young athletic players coming into their own. And anything can happen at that juncture. And if the Spurs were smart and they start having a little bit of money, they can have this cap space that they can work with, Maybe they can go after some key pieces. Not maybe this team doesn't need legit stars. Everybody says, oh, you need a legitimate superstar because the West is stacked. Maybe you don't need to do that because we don't know what young players we have right now that really haven't, come into their own. Maybe we have stars in the making right here in front of us. We just have to be patient with this process. So that's why I say, give it about 3 seasons and let's see what happens at that point in time. Because either this thing worked or it didn't, and we're going to see those pieces get shuffled and moved or traded,
Yeah, I mean, one of the most frustrating things about the Spurs' young players is depending on which game you watch them play, they look like they could be future all-stars, right? I mean, you think back to that Derek White series against Denver. Was that last year?
Was the year before?
Yeah, a year before, right? Where he scored, I think it was 36 points in a game and looked amazing.
Looked good in the bubble too.
Yeah, and everyone was hyped on him, right? He made the FIBA World Championship squad that season, I think in large part due to that game. And we were expecting these colossal leaps forward from players like him, like DeJounte Murray, and they haven't really regressed, but they also haven't leapt forward in the way that you would expect of a future all-star.
Yeah.
So
I think a lot of that has to do with the minutes that they get out on the court.
Yeah.
And not only that, but you look back at the beginning of the season, Coach Pop knew what was up, and that's why we saw so many lineup changes. When you have that many lineup changes, it's hard to get any rhythm, because you're switching players out so much. They really don't know their tendencies. They don't have any cohesiveness yet. And then we didn't see that cohesiveness start really coming to fruition until we saw everybody come back from the bubble play and have that bubble play, over in Orlando, because they had all this time to work on certain aspects of their game. So this season was so weird how the season just abruptly ended. Then you have this couple of months where everybody was just doing their own thing, working on their game. Then they come back, so it's like 2 seasons in one, So we got to see a lot of growth happen in those couple of months with some of these players, mainly Keldon Johnson And then we saw Derek White. He looked tremendous when he came back and was playing at the bubble. DeJounte Murray, I have to be honest with you guys, didn't look so good.
No.
He's still, I think, maybe needs a full season to really show what he can do, because I think the injury was still harboring him a little bit, like holding him back from him really going all out. I think he might have still been worried about the injury a little bit, still, in the back of his mind. Is this gonna break again? Is this gonna, am I gonna re-injure myself? And it happens. Players have said when they come back from a major injury, a surgery, it takes them a full season to really get back into the swing of things again. So we'll see. I think just give it 3 seasons, maybe 4, and we'll see what this team really can do. There's a lot of questions with Keldon coming into his own, really ahead of the curve. He looks amazing. He's set up to be the next, superstar for the San Antonio Spurs. But then you have a lot of question marks. You have a question mark on DeJounte, question mark on Lonnie, question mark on Lucas Simonic, which a lot of fans are already saying that he's a bust. I'm like, he came from the EuroLeague. He's still learning the system. Don't be so hard on the guy. Give him another season and let's see what he can do. The last game that he played in the bubble, he looked really good, and Spurs fans were like, wow, look at Lucas Simonic. I'm like, I'm telling you, this kid has a big upside. Don't be so quick
He's so
to judge
confident
him.
too.
Yeah.
He's so confident.
He has handles for being such a big man. He can dribble the ball up the court like a guard. He has great handles. He just needs some time, and he needs to put on some weight. And I think the weight room will do him some good in the off season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you say about the Spurs, your optimistic timeline, I think smart money does not bet against the Spurs being good. I do think that I think more likely than not, the lull of the franchise will probably, I don't know, but I'm with you. I'm optimistic as well. I like a lot of what I see, and I think it's with guys like Lucas Simonic, it's pretty normal for them to get very little playing time in their first year and basically just almost redshirt, play a lot of G League games. Didn't Lonnie Walker, I think, kind of get the same treatment as well? Yeah. And now he's, showing up, having some great games. There's...
Same thing happened with Derek White and DeJounte Murray, but Spurs fans seem to forget about that.
Yeah, this might be a good time to transition into talking a little bit about some of the older players on the Spurs roster. I was listening to the pod you recorded recently with Jeff, and you talked about DeMar DeRozan staying in San Antonio. I think it might have been Jeff said that what he's hearing is that he's going to stay in San Antonio. Does that mean that he's going to opt into his $28 million player option for next year? Are they going to extend him?
If he opts in, that's exactly what he would be opting into, his player option, which is about $28 million. And to me, that would be the smart move for him, because we really, at this juncture, with the way things are, if you go into the open market, you could actually see that money go away, because teams are going to be less, let's say, optimistic about the upcoming season and what's going to happen, because it's going to be a shortened season, and there's only so much money that team is willing to go ahead and throw at free agents, because at the end of the day, you have to think about your bottom line in this uncertain world that we're in, in this weird pandemic that we have going on. And right now, when you look at it from the perspective that's running a business, you don't have any income coming in as far as ticket sales, and that's a big thing. Concession sales, even selling parking, all this generates revenue for said team. Jersey sales, what are we selling as far as merchandise that's exclusive to certain arenas, So at the end of the day, I think all these things have a factor into what a team is willing to pay for an aging superstar. DeMar DeRozan still has a lot of game in him, but at the end of the day, I think San Antonio would probably be the best destination for him. The only other thing I can see him doing is, if he's wanting to play for a chip and go for a win now mentality, he could always go and opt to see what he can do with Miami or go with the Lakers, if that's what he's wanting to do. But I really don't see him doing that. I think he's happy with what's happening here in San Antonio, because at the end of the day, he's a very private person.
Mm-hmm.
And with San Antonio being such a small media market, he's not hounded by paparazzi. He's not hounded if he goes out and eats and has cameras and photographers following him everywhere he goes and chronologing every aspect, every minute of his life. You're allowed to do these things. Just because you play basketball doesn't mean it's okay to have a camera in front of you 24/7 or having people come up to you just because. I mean, I think here in San Antonio, we can see our players out and about. We give them a quick hello, and people go about their day, or they say it's okay to take a picture with me. But everybody's really respectable and has that small city, mindset, that small town mindset in the big city. And I think that's something that's really played to the comfort level of one DeMar DeRozan. I do like DeMar. I like what he does here with San Antonio. I like his inclusion with the youth out there that we saw in the bubble. I think that was the perfect storm for success for the Spurs, is if they can play that style of small ball with DeMar DeRozan. When they insert LaMarcus, everything just slows down and gets so methodical, and you have to play almost a half-court set. And with DeMar out there with the youth, you can go ahead and get that exciting basketball that we like. They're running up and down the court. They're doing these great things in transition. They're able to keep up with the younger athletic teams out there, and they give themselves a better chance at winning, I think, when they play that way in the more modern style that Spurs fans have been clamoring for. So I, for one, hope DeMar does in fact stay. I think Jeff is correct in saying that he more than likely will go ahead and re-sign with San Antonio. But I think it's going to be somewhere along the lines of maybe like a 2-year deal, meaning that really he's going to sign for 1 year and then see what happens after that,
Sure.
Yeah, with an option.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I thought in the bubble, they sort of figured out how to play DeMar DeRozan, and he looked really good. And when I say they figured out how to play him, I mean they did what you said. They went small and played him at the 4, right? Which I think mitigates his shooting liabilities, right? So I think there's a role for DeMar DeRozan in the NBA and on a good team. It's just his fit's always going to be a weird one because he's terrible at defense and he's a horrible 3-point shooter.
I mean, at this point, I don't even know if you can say he's anything 3-point related about it.
Yeah, I mean, the Spurs just stopped him from shooting anymore. Like, I don't think he even averaged 1 3-point attempt a game with the Spurs.
He's great in ISO situations, creating his own shot. But do you necessarily want him to do that at the end of games? And I think that's where Spurs fans have an issue with DeMar. They're quick to blame him for the team losing if they're down by 1 and they put the ball in DeMar's hands. DeMar has been the most consistent player for the San Antonio Spurs this last season. So why wouldn't you put the ball in his hands? The problem being is that they put him in situations that aren't going to be conducive to his style of play. They're trying to run plays for him that I believe are unfair. If you want to get him in a good scoring position, that means that you have to inbound the ball to somebody else other than DeMar DeRozan. Give him a chance to get set up and get in a good situation where he can get a good look to the basket or to the rim, and either decide to go ahead and create that space and shoot a jumper, or just go ahead and be aggressive and go to the rim, get fouled and go to the stripe, or get the and one, But I feel like it's not fair when you put the ball in his hands and just say, okay, clear out and let's see what he can do. He's proven that even with Toronto, that's not good for him, so why would it be good for him in San Antonio? So the blame isn't solely on him. I understand he is getting paid to produce and do all these things, but at the end of the day, you have to look at him as far as a player. You have to put him in situations that are going to be good for him to be able to win the game. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So it sounds like you're pretty high on DeMar, including like being amenable to him coming back on what I presume would not be a $30 million a year deal.
Yeah.
But LaMarcus Aldridge, his contract expires at the end of 2021, which would be the same as DeMar's if he takes the option. Do you have any desire or inclination that he would stay as a veteran presence on a cheaper deal? I mean, like this year it's funny because the bubble Spurs were so good without LaMarcus Aldridge. But if you look at his stats from the year, I mean, he had an amazing year. Pop asking him to start shooting threes was like a masterstroke. He shot like almost 40% on threes. So it's a question of, he has one more year left on his contract, and we just saw how good the Spurs can be with small ball. How do you think that affects Pop's game plan for next year with this team?
I think the Spurs would be smart to go ahead and let Lamar go.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, he's not conducive to what this team needs to be successful. He's slow and methodical. He's kind of part of an archaic system, the system of the big man, which is going the way of the dinosaur in the modern NBA. There is a place for a big man, but I think right now for the Spurs, in order for them to be the team that goes and gets back to form again, you have to kind of change your style of play, and that means not necessarily having LaMarcus Aldridge be your big anymore. You have to at times get faster. Sometimes you might have to downsize and have athleticism and youthfulness there. You need those young legs to be able to run the floor. You're going to need somebody who can be a good rim protector, but also be able to play great defense. And if they don't give you 20 points a night, so be it. You have other players who can step up and give you that, but you need to have solid rebounding, a solid rim protector there in lieu of one LaMarcus Aldridge, who's shown that he doesn't like to do that. He doesn't even like playing center, So that job has fallen onto Yaka Portal. LaMarcus is happy being in the power forward position, He does not have the inkling to play center. He hates that. And I guess at the end of the day, my gut tells me by him, we go back a couple of seasons, by him asking to be traded, that means that he was already unhappy, and I think he's just fulfilling his commitment. But at the end of the day, I think his heart is telling him he wants to finish his career off in Portland. And I can't fault the man for wanting to go back and finish his career where it all started. And maybe he wants to go out and have one last run with Dame Dalla. Who can fault the guy for that? I'd like to see it as a fan, but I think his time here in San Antonio has pretty much come to an end.
Yeah, I would. I mean, his contract is like not. It's fairly movable. I think it's not like a full max. I think it's a declining. I think it's like mid 20 millions, and I think there would be a team willing to take him if the Spurs decided to go in that direction. So it's not the worst situation in the world to have him under contract for the last year.
It does depend what they wind up doing with one Yaka Portal. He's going to be a free agent. The Spurs are either going to have to go ahead and match, or what are they going to do? Are they going to let him go? To me, I just hope that we can keep him because he does have some youthfulness in him, that he can keep up with these younger players out there on the court. And he's shown that he can be a good piece for San Antonio, a good solid piece for us. Not superstar status, but a really good solid piece. And I think if he just takes on that role player mentality, because that's exactly what he's going to be, and just roll with it and just go out there and just be that Energizer Bunny and give us a solid 5-6 minutes, for every quarter that you're playing out there. That's all we can expect from him. And if he scores points, that's a plus. But that's not why he's out there. He's out there to go ahead and help us get rebounds, help, in pick and roll situations, go out there and set the screens, go out there and start getting us the rebounds, protect the rim, block a portal. He has that nickname for a reason, So I think that's exactly what his role would be with San Antonio moving forward, is a really good role player. And I hope the Spurs are able to keep him and somebody's not throwing crazy money at him, which I doubt that's going to happen in today's NBA, but I hope he stays.
The Knicks still exist, and they're kind of a wild card.
Knicks are going to Knicks, man.
Yeah.
Poor Knicks. Poor Knicks.
Poor Knicks fans. I don't feel bad for anyone.
I hope Marcus Morris enjoyed his time with the Knicks over the Spurs. That seems like a good career decision to have eschewed the most stable franchise in league history for the most unstable franchise in league history.
Yeah.
But Joe, let's try to wrap things up. I am cognizant of your time. You've been so gracious with it. Let's just end with one last point, which is I just wanted to ask you about Pop. Do you have any ideas about how long Pop's gonna coach the Spurs? How many more years? And who do you think's gonna replace him?
Yeah, me and Jeff have had this discussion, and I've had this discussion with some of my guests on my podcast, the Two Shots podcast, as well.
Yeah, I listened to the discussion with Jeff on the Becky Hammond pod. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're assuming that if our gut tells us what Pop is kind of going to do, I would see him coaching for a solid 2 more seasons.
Okay.
After that, I'd see him after this season, probably notifying the Spurs, maybe letting them know, hey, I got 2 more seasons, or maybe only 1 more season left, and that's pretty much it. I'm done. He's going to go ahead, and he has every right to go ahead and pick his successor. Why wouldn't he not pick his successor and kind of groom them? One of the things that I believe that the Spurs might do is, if you look and you look at who's deserving on this team to kind of pick up that mantle, Becky Hammond is the most seasoned Spurs assistant coach that we have right now. She's very intelligent, smart, very hands-on. I see her in practices when I go out to the arena early, and I see her warming up there with the players and working with them. She's very hands-on out there in warm-ups and everything on the court, going through the motions with them, passing them the ball. It's very vocal, showing them what she wants them to do, what she wants them to work on. They listen to her, and given that they listen to her, she's a player's coach. She's played the game at such a high level. She has a lot of knowledge. I think she would be the perfect fit for the Spurs, not only showing that they're making strides here in the NBA by hiring the first female head coach in today's NBA. That's groundbreaking, and I think the Spurs already, kind of showed that they're willing to do that by hiring her in the first place and making her the first female assistant coach in NBA history. But if you look at it as well, and they don't decide to go with Becky, or Becky doesn't really want to wait 2 more years for Coach Pop to make up his mind, and she gets an offer, because every time we have a head coaching vacancy, Becky Hammond's name is going to be thrown in that mix. Every single time. You look, okay, she goes ahead and decides to leave. You have Tim Duncan, who's out there, and he's been an assistant coach, and who can not want Tim Duncan as a coach out there coaching the Spurs? Somebody who has NBA Finals knowledge, who's a winner in every sense of the word. Two-time MVP, five-time NBA champion. Numerous times on the NBA first team. You can't say enough about him. The guy just knows how to win.
One of the best leaders ever.
Yeah, that's the big thing. Yeah.
And if he brings that winning mentality, to these players here and just teaches them, and I think he would make another really good head coach. And of course, Spurs fans would fall in love with Coach Timmy right away. So to me, it could either go one of two ways like that, or the Spurs could go ahead and just hire from outside the organization and just get somebody that we never even knew about before.
I mean, it could be potentially really contentious if Becky Hammond is still on the team when Pop retires, which is by no means guaranteed. I mean, she's been invited to interviews, it seems like, every offseason. But at that point, she's already the longest tenured Spurs assistant coach, right?
Yes.
She's the lead assistant right now. I think the fan base is going to be wanting Tim Duncan to replace Pop, because that would just be awesome from a fan perspective, right?
Yeah.
People in San Antonio love Tim Duncan. But if they chose Tim Duncan over Becky Hammond, that could potentially be a really contentious issue, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and there was that controversy in, I think, March it was, when Tim Duncan took on head coaching responsibilities against Charlotte, and they passed over Becky Hammond for it. And the reasoning that was given was that, well, Tim is the Charlotte Hornets scouting guy. He's our coach that scouts them, so he already has the game plan. Who knows what the actual story was, but I think there was already a little bit of controversy there, so I can only imagine the firestorm. But I think either one of them would probably be a great choice. I think Hammond probably has the longer proven track record, but can't say no to Tim Duncan.
Tim Duncan's a winner, man. That's all you can say. And Becky Hammon, of course, she has a lot of knowledge and she knows how to play the game, and she's a winner as well, you know. And I think out of the two, I'd have to say that my heart would be open to having Becky Hammond step into that head coaching position, just because she's earned it, you know. But if you look, and how can you not go ahead and open that situation or that position up to one Tim Duncan as well, one of the greats, you know? Wouldn't it be ironic if Timmy comes and they give him the head coaching position, and then he goes immediately and gets his assistant head coach, one Manu Ginobili? I think Spurs fans would erupt.
Yeah, they would absolutely love that, for sure. For sure. All right, well, we need to get ready for the finals tonight.
We were going to talk about Danny Green's performance in the finals, but we don't want to end things on a sour note. So,
oh my! All you can say is his 3-point shooting speaks volumes.
Yes.
Yeah, sure does.
Yep.
Sure does. But yeah, thanks so much for coming on, Joe. It was a pleasure having you. I'm so glad that Jeff put us in touch. You want to just plug your stuff one more time for our viewers?
Yeah, you can always follow me on Twitter. I'm very active on Twitter at Two Shots Podcast, and it's all spelled out TWOSHOTS Podcast. And for everything else you need to know about us, just go ahead and check us out at TwoShotsPodcast.com, where we upload our latest episodes, and we're going to have a new one coming around this week, so keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, and it's great content. Please check out Joe's stuff. As always, check us out at Away Team Pod Twitter, or on Twitter, and anything else? Check out our Game 3 analysis, and yeah.
Yeah, I think that's
and also
it.
Let's go ahead and plug Jeff Garcia one more time. Make sure you follow Jeff Garcia. He is the Woj of all things Spurs here for us locally in San Antonio. So make sure you go ahead and follow Jeff. He's also the lead Spurs writer for the Spurs Zone over at News 4 San Antonio and KABB Fox 29 San Antonio. And I believe his handle on Twitter is Jeff G. Jeff G. Let me go ahead and check it out. I want to make sure that I give his plug the right way, because then Jeff will come back and give me flack for it. And he's going to say, why didn't you plug it correctly, Joe? It's at Jeff G. Spurs Zone. So I did get it right. At Jeff G. Spurs Zone. So make sure you go and give him a follow on Twitter.
All right. Well, Joe, you have a good one. And yeah, we'll have to do it again soon.
Yeah. Take care. Thanks for coming on.
Pleasure. Thank you both for having me on. It was a great honor, and I look forward to coming out on your show again. Thank you very much.
All right.
Enjoy Game 4.
Yes, sir.